podcast on BBC Radio Cumbria.
6 minutes past 8. Hello, good morning. So after a year of investigations and nearly £500,000 of taxpayer money, Cumbria's suspended temporary Chief Constable Stuart Hyde is going back to work, but only as a Deputy Chief Constable and only for 4 months before retiring. That's despite Cumbria Police and Crime Commissioner Richard Rhodes calling for his resignation or retirement last week. Mr Rhodes is unrepentant for his actions.
Look at the evidence and say to myself, well, I don't think that's quite right. And there, I see this evidence and I say, no, there are questions to answer. I will do so, and I'm entitled to do so.
And Mr Rhodes admitted taxpayers have not got value for money.
I could not possibly support the idea that the taxpayer in this case had got value for money. It's a huge amount of money. I've already had conversations with the Minister for Policing, Damien Green, and told him that I will be giving him the benefit of my thoughts as a result of this process, because clearly members of the public, quite rightly, see this as a nonsense.
The former Chief Constable of West Mercia Police and now independent analyst for the think tank Policing First, Paul West, agrees the situation is a fiasco and is calling on the panel that scrutinises Richard Rhodes to look at the detail of the whole process.
I think they have a really important role on behalf of the public of Cumbria to call for evidence, to scrutinise in detail the decision-making of the Police and Crime Commissioner, so that, you know, if circumstances, and let's hope that they don't, but if circumstances like similar to this were to arise in Cumbria or elsewhere, then the lessons of last week, and there has to be some lessons, can be learnt, so we're not faced with such a bizarre situation again that, as I say, thankfully, the temporary Chief Constable Bernard Lawson has seen sense and has come to a very sensible and fair resolution.
Well, Cumbria's Police and Crime Panel is meeting today. Celia Tibble is the chairman, and she joins us now. Good morning to you. Will the fiasco be the focus of today's meeting?
Good morning, Mike. I'm not sure where you got information that we're meeting today. We aren't meeting today. There is not a meeting of the Police and Crime Panel today. I don't know who gave you that information.
OK, fair enough. Well, apologies for that miscommunication. Yeah. Let's talk about the saga. Are you satisfied Mr Rhodes took the right course of action in calling for Stuart Hyde to stand down, regardless of the findings of the investigation?
I'm not sure it was regardless of the findings in the investigation. Mr Rhodes is completely within his rights to act as he did. He is entitled to his view. As it now transpires, there's no role for the PCP with regards to Mr Hyde, but we will be considering the entire episode and all the correspondence that we have been given at the next panel meeting. In line with the recommendations following the Home Affairs Committee, Mr Rhodes has kept me up to date with his intentions and his deliberations. I have circulated that to all the panel members, and up to now, no member of the panel has indicated they have issues with the procedure up to date.
The temporary Chief Constable Bernard Lawson says he agrees there were some small areas of concern, but he's happy to invite Mr Hyde back to his substantive role as Deputy Chief Constable. Surely, if that being the case, that makes Mr Rhodes' position untenable.
No, the Chief Constable Lawson said that Mr Hyde's behaviour fell short of what the police service and the public should demand from a senior public servant.
But it wasn't gross misconduct or criminality, though, was it?
And they were the only reasons which Mr Hyde could be sacked. If I, as a nurse, my behaviour fell short of what was demanded from me as a nurse, then I would face disciplinary proceedings. Mr Hyde himself has said that he has learned a great deal about his performance and recognises fully the need to improve how he manages himself and his accountability. Now, Mr Rhodes felt that the detail of the report, and people can read the executive summary and come to their own conclusions, felt that Mr Hyde at this time was not a suitable person to be the Chief Constable. We as the Police and Crime Panel have not yet been able to question Mr Rhodes in detail, and following those questions we will publish our deliberations.
But will you be asking him as part of that questioning why begin a process three days before his jurisdiction runs out?
I think Mr. Rhodes answered that question on your drive time programme yesterday. He has followed the legislation, he has followed the procedure, which is all that he and we as a police and crime panel can do. And he has indicated, and I think from the clip I heard earlier, Mr. West has indicated, the procedure that has to be followed is questionable. It's a mire. It doesn't make sense to normal people.
Do you agree this has been a waste of taxpayers' money?
It's not been a good use of taxpayers' money.
Has it been a waste of taxpayers' money?
It's not been a good use of taxpayers' money. Unfortunately, the Commissioner and ourselves as a police and crime panel inherited this from the now defunct police authority, and we have had to do what we could do following that inheritance. We both feel, myself and the Commissioner, that the way we've had to deal with this, following the legislation and the guidelines, is not best use of public money.
So you're just washing your hands of the whole thing then?
No, I'm not washing my hands of the whole thing. As I've indicated to you, we will be discussing this as a police and crime panel, scrutinising it in the manner that we have to, as set down in the legislation. That meeting will be in public. Mr. Rhodes will be questioned at that meeting, and our deliberations and our decisions and our reasons will be published.
Is it going to be a case of Stuart Hyde being at that meeting as well?
No one's indicated that they want to question Mr. Hyde. No, Mr. Hyde hasn't. I'm not sure whether our procedure allows for that, because once he is not subject to Section 38 procedure, then the police and crime panel doesn't have a role.
So if that's the case, then why go through the process? Why waste time? Why waste money questioning Mr. Rhodes if his jurisdiction has gone?
No, Mr. Rhodes' jurisdiction has not gone.
It has over Mr. Hyde.
But it hasn't over the Chief Constable. Chief Constable Lawson is going to supervise. He has said that he will deal with any performance issues in his statement yesterday. The police and crime panel can only question the Commissioner. The Commissioner has to answer questions of the police and crime panel, and we will be looking at what happened, how it happened, and making recommendations both to Mr. Rhodes on the procedure, and it may be that we will be making recommendation to the government on how this procedure has worked, or in this case hasn't seemed to have worked for the benefit of the people of Cumbria.
So basically, despite this going on for a year, there's still a whole load more talking to be done.
I'm sure my colleagues on the police and crime panel will have questions to ask Mr. Rhodes, and that is our job. That is what what the police and crime panel was set up for.
Celia Tibble, the chairman of Cumbria's Police and Crime Panel, thank you very much for joining us on the programme this morning.